Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast. I am one of your two or three co-hosts for today, John DeLynn. Hi, everyone. As you can see, if you're watching us, I'm sitting here next to Jen. Hey, Jen.
Hey, everyone.
It's your first time to co-host in Studio One.
It is.
What do you think?
It's great.
Yeah, it's good to have you.
Neat little setup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for staying late tonight. So we've got Jen Camp with us, and we also have Gerardo with us. We'll be showing him in just a second. And we're super excited to have Radio Free Mormon here with us as well. This is a timely and important news story. We try and cover breaking news stories within Mormonism if we feel like they're important. And this is an important one. The title of today's episode is Mormon Leaders Defend Child Abuser. It is May 17th, 2022. And we are here to discuss yet another disturbing child sex abuse case within Mormonism or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I would just have to say it's almost like one of these comes out every month. And this has been true for 5 or 10 years at least. And so it's the type of case, Jen, that I'm not like happy to do. I'm not excited to do these. Mm-hmm. It's depressing and dark and sad in some ways, but how do we not cover it?
Yeah, in all ways. Yeah, it needs to be covered because it needs to change. Yeah. I see Kolby's here on the comments. Hi, Kolby.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're here today too.
Yeah, Kolby and his dear wife were on just recently as we covered their attempts to make build awareness within their ward and stake in Idaho about Bishop, who is a sex abuser. We'll include their story in the show notes. But that's what we're here to cover today. We want to begin with a content warning. We will be talking about sexual abuse, and some of the discussion may be disturbing. So please either tend to whoever's listening within earshot of this episode or viewing it if you're watching it, or if you yourself need to practice self-care, take breaks, whatever, all the trigger warnings for the disturbing adult nature of today's content. We are here to cover this story. So I'm now showing from the Star Tribune, published May 13th, 2022. So just 4 days ago, a story with the headline, former Minnesota Mormon leader convicted of sexually assaulting 13-year-old boy. That is the headline. And we'll go ahead and read just a bit about the story, just to give some detail. The man in this photo is mentioned as Michael Davis in the Star Tribune, and I'll just read what the article says. A former church leader, or Mormon church leader, I'll say, in southeast Minnesota was convicted Friday of sexually assaulting a 13-year-old boy in 2018. Michael Davis, 37, of Dodge Center, was found guilty of 2 charges each of first and second degree criminal sexual conduct, as well as 1 count of indecent exposure. He was taken into custody after the verdict. A sentencing date has not been set. A jury took less than 4 hours to reach a decision. Davis's trial started Monday. According to court documents, Davis sexually assaulted the teen several times at Davis's home in December 2018. Davis was an Elders Quorum President at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Casson. We'll see if I pronounce that right later. The victim and his family were also members at the time, and Davis was asked to be a mentor to the teen. Court records showed Davis is a registered sex offender in Utah, where he was convicted of 2 sex crimes before moving to Minnesota. Jeffrey Harlight, I have no idea if I pronounced that right, an attorney with the Olmsted County Attorney's Office prosecuting the case for Dodge County, argued the evidence was, quote, overwhelming, close quote, that Davis groomed and assaulted the victim under the guise of being a mentor. Defense attorney Thomas Braun argued that the victim's and witnesses' testimony was inconsistent and that law enforcement did a poor investigation after a victim's mother reported Davis to police in April 2019. Police stopped Davis in February 2019 for a seatbelt violation while he was driving with the victim. Officers questioned the victim, who denied any abuse took place. Law enforcement initially closed the investigation into Davis, but reopened it after the victim told his relatives about the assaults in late March. And if I had to give any more kind of just a teaser opening introduction, a couple things that are particularly disturbing about this case is, number one, that this Davis fellow was a registered sex offender in Utah, and somehow he ends up as Elders Quorum President in Minnesota. How in the world does a registered sex offender become, let's just say, one of the top 5 leaders of an entire Mormon congregation? That's deeply problematic. Is there no screening? Is there no background checks? Is there no flagging of membership records? How in the world did that happen?
Is there no discernment?
Yeah, right. Is there no discernment? Very, very good, Jen. And then what we'll be discussing is, I believe, the stake president and I think it's a branch president's involvement in the case. And it turns out that they were advocating for the abuser in the court case, not the victim. They have 2 signed affidavits, as I understand it. We'll be getting into this in a second. Trying to siding with the defense, not with the prosecution. So why would Mormon leaders be siding with the defense of someone accused of sexual abuse who has a record? Why is the stake president and the branch president siding with the abuser, the defender, not the victim or the side of the prosecution? And I'm sure there's other issues we're going to be discussing as well. So with that, we are super excited to bring on Gerardo, who is the reason this whole thing is happening. Gerardo is our friend and a colleague and co-host. Gerardo, thanks for making this happen. It's good to have you as a co-host today.
Yeah, thanks, John. Hello, everyone. And I want to give a shout out to Michael, because I think I've been Facebook friends with Michael Benjamin for a while. And he's been posting a lot about this case and his involvement in the case. And I think one of his last posts really caught my eye, where he mentioned, the affidavits that were submitted by the stake president and the branch president. I was like, oh, I wonder what that's about. And thought that this was a pretty interesting and unique case. Something I personally hadn't heard before. Usually the church wants to distance church leaders from ever getting any involvement in cases like this, but this was maybe a little bit different. So big shout out to Michael Benjamin, who has been really involved with this case. His testimony was really important in getting the abuser convicted. And so welcome, Michael. If you can tell us a little bit about you. Well, and John, I don't know if you want to say something.
No. Thanks, Gerardo. And I'm going to add another really super disturbing preview to this case is the way Michael, just like with Kolby, how Kolby was kind of punished by his Mormon church leadership for trying to help keep the members safe, or help the church become a safer place. Just like Kolby Reddish was punished. I think part of what we're going to be talking about is how Michael was also punished for advocating for the victims and for trying to make the church safe. But Michael, we're almost ready to come to you. We're super happy to have Radio Free Mormon here with us as well. Radio Free Mormon is a known legend in the podcasting realm. He co-hosts Mormonism Live with Bill Reel, and he, of course, is the host of Radio Free Mormon podcast. And he's a freaking criminal defense attorney, right, Radio Free Mormon?
That is true.
So you're going to be siding with the defense on this case as well, I assume.
I'm going to try and analyze this as fairly and impartially as I can, to the extent that you want me to do so.
Awesome. Well, Radio Free Mormon, we're really, really grateful. And I think Gerardo notified you like 8 minutes ago that you were this So we appreciate you coming on. I'm joking, but we
It was
appreciate
9 o'clock last night.
Okay. Yeah, we appreciate you jumping on, and we love you and adore you. And so without any further ado, Michael Benjamin, you are the main guest of today's show, and in some ways kind of the hero of this, well, one of the heroes in the story, if you even want to be named as such. Thanks for joining us on Mormon Stories.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. And I was telling you earlier, I'm a dedicated listener, listen to Mormon Stories and Radio Free Mormon while I'm running and doing dishes and cleaning the house. So yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for bringing attention to this case. I think it's really important, and everything you mentioned earlier, I think needs to be discussed and brought to people's awareness. Yeah, and I don't consider myself a hero in this situation. I think the true hero is the victim or the survivor in this case, who was brave enough to tell his story, not only when he was interviewed, but also again in court, which usually isn't the case. Usually they don't have the victim testify again in court. Here in Minnesota, they usually use what's called a corner house interview. So he actually testified twice.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm excited to get into several things. We want to talk about your background a bit, Michael, how you got into this case, and then we'll talk about the history of the defendant, and then we'll talk about the actual case itself and how the church handled it. Yeah. So, Gerardo, do you want me to kind of guide this, or were you planning on kind of guiding this interview?
You can go ahead. Well, I'll probably be helping, giving the context along with Michael, and RFM has read a lot about it today. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Michael. So if you don't mind, why don't you back up and just tell us just a tiny bit about yourself and a little bit of context about you before we jump into the case?
Sure. So I was born and raised here in Minnesota, near the Twin Cities, and was raised in the church my whole life. My parents converted when they were in their teens and young adulthood, but I was essentially raised in the church, baptized at 8, graduated from high school in 1993, went to BYU to study. And then from 1994 to 1996, I went on a mission to Ecuador, and then came back from my mission to Ecuador and went back to BYU, got my bachelor's degree in social work in 1999. And then I took a year and worked in Utah in Provo as a child protection investigator. And then I decided to go back to school to get my master's degree in social work at BYU, and graduated with my MSW in 2002. And then moved to Caldwell, Idaho, which is just outside of Boise. And that's where I had my first job as a therapist, a clinical social worker, and lived in Caldwell, Idaho from 2002 to 2011. While there, like I said, I was a therapist at a community health center, and then I served in multiple leadership positions in Idaho, including the Elders Quorum President and branch president of a Spanish branch there. And then in 2011, I moved here to Rochester, Minnesota, which is in southeast Minnesota, and worked at the Mayo Clinic for about 5 years, and then as a therapist. And then I moved over to another agency here in Rochester, and that's where I currently work. I have 4 kids, 23, 21, 18, and 17. And what else can I say? I love to run, love Broadway musicals. So RFM, I love listening to all your references to Broadway musicals.
What is the best Broadway musical? And this will decide whether RFM or I or Jen or Gerardo like you best.
My current favorites, because they kind of change, I would say are Dear Evan Hansen
There you go.
and
There you go.
Hamilton. So,
Okay.
yeah.
You just endeared yourself to me and estranged yourself from RFM. RFM would want to hear like, Camelot or Man of La Mancha or
Hello, Dolly. Yeah.
like,
All the classics.
is that right, RFM?
The Music Man
Music Man.
is the correct answer. So, Mr. Benjamin, what is your current relationship with the LDS Church, if you don't mind my asking?
Yeah, so I'm still a member. I would say I'm physically in, mentally out. And this case had a lot to do with me being mentally out. What's surprising to me with everything that's happened, and we'll get into some of the details later, is that I haven't been ever officially like called to a disciplinary council or disfellowshipped or excommunicated. There's been a lot of like other things that have happened short of that, and actions taken short of that. But yeah, I would consider myself still a member of the church. I'm still on the membership records, but have not been actively attending.
Okay. What I note that's to me standing out most from your introduction is that you're a licensed clinical social worker. That puts you in a whole nother category in terms of your involvement in this case, because you know about mandatory reporting, you know about how to handle sexual abuse, you know what it does to families, you know the proper way to handle these sorts of things. And I would guess that would put you, once you hear about this happening in your own neck of the woods, so to speak, that would give you a strong motivation to want to make sure the victim's taken care of in the proper way, and that other ward and branch and stake members are kept safe, because you know the risks of having a registered sex offender in your midst, so to speak.
Exactly. Yeah, you hit it right on the head. When this first hit the news back in 2019, I read the article and saw that he was a member of the church, was an Elders Quorum President, and that there was this claim out there of him not being in a position of authority. And immediately, yeah, all my social work training and red flags went off, and that's when I just became really passionate about speaking out about this case, getting involved. I am the one that reached out to the prosecuting attorney to give him information, because I knew, in rural Southeast Minnesota, the county attorney is probably not going to know a lot about the LDS Church. And so I took it upon myself to educate him on the structure and hierarchy of the church. But yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, not only, am I a social worker and have experience doing child abuse investigations and know all the ins and outs of, mandated reporting and sexual abuse, victims and cases. But as a therapist, I treat and work with kids every single day who have been sexually abused. And so it's something very near and dear to my heart, and something that I feel very passionate about, which is why I've been so outspoken about this case. And that's really why I have been speaking out, is because I want to create a safe place for kids within the church. Whether I'm in or out of the church, I want the church to be a safe place for kids. If there's going to be kids in the church, I want them to be protected, and I want there to be policies and procedures in place to protect them so that cases like this don't happen again. Perfect.
Okay, before we actually jump into the facts of this case, I want to do a quick exercise. I think the Mormon Church has a pretty well-established pattern for how it handles sex abuse cases in the church. And so kind of putting aside the little that I even know about this case, I want to sort of like lay out what that pattern historically has been, so that then we can see if this case matches the pattern. Is that okay? So I want RFM and Gerardo and Michael, I want you, well, not you, Michael. I want everyone and Jen to fill in what I'm missing. But basically, whether it's through Sam Young's work with Protect LDS Children, or all the abuse victims that we've covered on Mormon Stories, and all the emails and direct messages that we get, which have been in the thousands, not exaggerating, over my time with Mormon Stories, because sexual abuse is rampant in the Mormon Church. As I understand it, here's kind of how it goes. That oftentimes, just like with Spotlight in the Catholic Church, that the abusers are not tracked, or they're not punished. They're not kept from positions where they might have power or access to further victims. So they're often repeat offenders who abuse, who are known offenders from the church in the past, right? When they abuse, the victims are usually silenced or told to be quiet. Their family members are also usually silenced and told to not tell anyone. They're usually all encouraged to trust in the atonement, so that they're rushed to forgive. The bishops or stake presidents don't seek them professional help usually. The bishops are given or branch presidents are given a 1-800 number by the church to call. They call the 1-800 number. The 1-800 number takes them to Kurt McConkie, the law firm, and usually Kurt McConkie tells bishops or branch presidents not to report the case to the police to avoid it becoming a legal matter. And then heavy pressure is made to kind of silence the case, to make it go away, to not tell anyone. Oftentimes, not only are the abusers not punished, they're often not disciplined, and then often they're just allowed again to repeat the abuse. And again, the legal authorities are often just never involved at all. If it does spill out, then the church often tries to either kill the case, discredit the accusers, and or if they have to, pay a bunch of money to settle it, and it's hush money, and they sign a deal where the victims and their family members all have to stay quiet. Now, is that the pattern that you all, Jen, Michael, Gerardo, or RFM, is that the pattern that we've kind of established on Mormon Stories and in other areas? Is there anything I'm missing? Is that not being fair? What would you guys add, remove, or tweak? Jen, you go first.
I don't think there's anything.
Does that kind of...
Yeah, that's what I've heard as far
Okay.
as other people's stories and ones that I know personally.
Okay. Gerardo, anything you want to add, remove, or tweak?
I think I would try to be as fair as possible to the church. They would say that they have a statement, that they are always reading about how the church stands against abuse, any kind of abuse. And it's interesting. From what I remember, the statement doesn't say anything about how the church priority being protect victims or anything like that. I think basically the statement is just they are against abuse. They don't condone it. Any kind of abuse is wrong. Now, I know policies have changed, and the church has tried to change policies on how to handle it. The hotline that you're talking about still exists. Bishops and stake presidents are still told to call the church headquarters or the hotline, which goes to church lawyers, right? That's still on the handbook of instructions. And I think that the church will try to try to dismiss the case, or try to get the case dismissed, or try to say, dismiss the victim if it threatens their authority or it threatens the image of the church. That's when usually the church will get involved. And this happens to be one of those cases. I think those are the things I would add.
Okay, thanks, Gerardo. Yeah, I think, yep, I appreciate you working to be fair. The church is against abuse as a matter of public record.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wish their actions would follow that statement.
Yeah.
But it is their official policy that abuse is bad, which we have to give them credit for.
Right.
RFM, what else would you add or take away? Why are you smiling, RFM?
Because I think we can all agree that Hitler was probably a bad guy. I mean, it's not remarkable to have anybody say, oh, well, child abuse is a bad thing. I would say a couple of things, however. First is that the newspaper article that you read, John, is wrong in at least one respect. There are not 2 prior sex convictions from Utah. There are actually 3. And they may have made that mistake because 2 of them were guilty pleas entered under the same cause number. But there are actually 3 of them from Utah. The other thing is that what we're going to see here is that what ends up happening is that when you call the church legal counsel, the church legal counsel represents the church. They don't represent the individual members. They represent the church. And I think that basically what they try and do is they vet these calls that are coming in to see if there's any possibility that the child abuse, the alleged child abuse that's going on, was conducted by a leader of the church or at church or on a church function. Is there any way that the church could be held civilly liable for this action that's being alleged? And I think that if they see that that's not the case, then they don't really worry that much about it because the church isn't on the hook. But if there is an instance where a bishop does it, Elders Quorum President does it, it's at scout camp, girls camp, whatever it is that's church related, then they have a problem. And the problem is that these lawyers represent the church's interests, and the church's interests are not to be held liable and sued and have to pay a lot of money in exchange for this. And so sometimes the lawyers take steps in order to make sure that doesn't happen. And sometimes leverage is put on members who trust the leaders of the church to do the right thing by the church. And a lot of times they do.
Love it. Thank you, RFM. One thing I want to add to my narrative is what we learned from Kolby Reddish and what we're going to hear maybe from Michael is that if members are too outspoken about the abuse, if members try to in any way counsel church leaders about locally how to deal with this, and or if they start warning or cautioning members, trying to get the word out that there's potential risks here or a mishandling of the situation, it appears as though the Mormon Church has a history of punishing those members who act as either whistleblowers or as kind of vocal opponents to bad actions. So, okay, so we've kind of established that. Now, Michael, take away in terms of the story of this case. We've got some slides here that you can tell me when and where to join. But where should we begin, Michael, with, I guess, the perpetrator, right?
Sure.
Or where would you want to go next, Michael?
Do you want to start with the Utah convictions? Yeah.
Whatever
Okay.
we know about him and his history and his convictions. Yeah.
Yeah. So Michael Adam Davis lived in Sunset, Utah, and was, as RFM mentioned, convicted in 2003 and then again in 2006 for sexual abuse crimes. The one in 2003 actually happened in an LDS church bathroom. And so, leadership was aware, bishop was aware. And then the conviction in 2006, it references some sort of function at a camp. So, my assumption is that it was possibly a church camp, just based on the information from the records. And that also indicates that the bishop was notified in that case. So in both instances, and we don't know what leadership positions he had in each of those wards or branches, but it's clear that they happened at church activities, church functions, and that LDS leadership was aware of these instances of abuse. And I don't know if there's a slides to that.
Yeah, John, can we share the first? Yeah. So that's the 2003, right?
So for those who are just listening, should we describe what we're showing?
Yeah, so this is the 2003 crime report. Basically just giving some of the details of what happened. And so I highlighted this part where it just talks about the church scouting camp. It says Michael,
Or scouting function, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to read it, Gerardo?
Yeah. Michael, and just so people don't get confused, we have Michael Benjamin with us. And when we talk about, and then the perpetrator or the abuser his name is Michael Davis. So hopefully we don't want to get those confused. But right now we're talking about the abuser. Michael will tell him to hug him a little longer, stated that about a month ago they were at the church for a scouting function, and that he went to the bathroom, and while they're in the bathroom, while they were urinating, Michael moved over the small stall and
to the
stood
same
right next
to the same stall.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, to the same stall, and stood right next to
The victim.
the victim and urinated in the same stall. So yeah, that's what Michael was referencing. Michael Benjamin was referencing.
And so we've got a scout leader trying to urinate in the same stall intentionally with the Boy Scout, right?
Not sure if he was the leader, but he was. Michael Davis happened to be there. Yeah.
At the scouting function, yeah. And then it
Right.
goes on to say, further abuse that happened
Right.
at other places. But yeah, I found it interesting and concerning, right, that it happened at the church.
But I guess we don't want to leave the wrong impression. So I just want to maybe vaguely describe the rest of the report, because it's basically several instances of Michael trying to get the victim to touch his penis,
Yep.
sending him pictures of him naked, being told no, clothes being taken off,
Exposing himself.
exposing himself. Like it's all really legitimate stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just throwing in to say that it's actually not sending pictures. It's offering to send a picture, but being declined.
Okay. Thanks, RFM.
That's okay. Otherwise, it would have resulted in more than just a misdemeanor conviction for the urination in the stall incident.
Got it.
I don't know if I'm wrong, but he pleaded guilty, right? Or entered a plea deal for this one, right?
He did. And, I was reading this about urinating in the stall and the public exposure and the lewdness. And I was thinking, well, isn't that what we do as guys in bathrooms? But they interviewed Michael Davis, and Davis basically confessed that he was doing it so this other kid would see him. And that gave them enough to file the charge. They filed the one count. They got him to plead guilty to it, probably under pressure that if he didn't, they would file additional charges. But that's how that case wound up, as a misdemeanor, I believe.
Anything else you want to say about this particular crime report or case, RFM, that struck you or stood out to you? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Michael Benjamin.
And then the second. Go ahead, Michael.
No, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the next slide, this one has Sunset City Police Department in Utah. And this is just part of the report. But I just highlighted this part where it says that John, who's the father of the victim, stated that he talked to the bishop. And when he returned home and learned what had been said. So basically the bishop was informed of the abuse. And Michael, which one was the one where the bishop told the family to not talk about it?
That was in the 2003 case.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
We should have probably covered that.
The previous case.
Yep. The previous case,
With the Boy Scout.
In the church, the bishop told the victim's mother and I think several other ward members to not talk about the case to anybody, to not share it with neighbors, to basically keep it quiet.
Okay. And then who wants to summarize this Sunset City case, this second case? Who, Michael or RFM, do either of you want to kind of summarize what happened in the second case?
So my understanding is this one was a little more severe. These are felony charges, and it was unfortunately and very sadly against a female victim who had, I believe, cerebral palsy, and so it was a very vulnerable child. On top of being a child, had an illness, and he also pled guilty in this case as well, and just ended up with home confinement, I think, for 30 days and then 3 years of probation.
And this one did include full rape.
Mhm.
where here it's in this screenshot, it says Ruth stated that the victim told her that Michael Davis was bothering her and that he had raped her about a year ago and she didn't want him here. Ruth stated that the victim told her that Michael was asking her to have sex and talked to her about putting something between her legs. So this one was more severe, right?
Yeah, her order, it was more severe. I don't think there was actual penetration, because when the victim describes what happened, that he was on top of her, moving on her, but they both had their pants on. And so that's probably why it's not a rape charge, and why it is a forcible sexual abuse conviction, 2 counts from there. But apparently there was also a lifetime sex offender registration that he was put under.
Which is key in this case, right? So in 2006, he got put on the sex offender registry in Utah for life. And
does that put you into a national registry too, or not?
Yes.
Okay. So by this time, he's not only on Utah's, he should have his, as I feel like he should have his church record, his church membership record marked as a sexual offender multiple times, right?
Yeah.
This is why this one we highlighted that the bishop knew about this, because
and this is something I didn't add to my narrative. Oftentimes, well, I did. They're not sex abusers are often not disfellowshipped or excommunicated. Do we have any reason to believe, RFM or Michael, that this guy was disfellowshipped or excommunicated for these instances of sexual abuse?
I don't have any information that would support that.
Because excommunication would definitely go on your record, and that's what might have flagged his ability. That might have prevented his ability to become an Elders Quorum President later, right, if church discipline had happened. I mean, I guess maybe the second instance happened. No, the bishop knew. So
yeah. Well, and that's another key part in this. That's another key part in this whole case is, church policy, and I think we'll get to this later in the handbook. It clearly states that any member who's convicted of a sex crime against a child should have their membership record automatically annotated, and that the only way it can have that annotation removed is from permission from the first presidency. So the Utah leaders, either one of them in either of these cases, should have annotated Michael Davis's membership record at a very minimum. Even if he wasn't excommunicated, his record should have been annotated according to the church policy. And so either the Utah leaders didn't annotate his membership record according to the policy, or the leaders here in Minnesota didn't look at the annotation if it was there.
Okay.
Or the first presidency took it off
somehow.
Yeah.
It got absolved. Okay. So that's disturbing. Where do we go from here, Michael?
So then in 2008, and I don't have details about this, all we know is that he violated probation of some sort in 2008. And that's kind of the last that I know of what happened in Utah. And then somewhere between then and 2018, I don't know when, he moved here to Minnesota. And in December of 2018 is where he victimized the young man here in Minnesota, in the Casson branch. And you did say the name right, John. It's Casson. So
okay.
So there's a little branch here in Casson, Minnesota, that's about 20 to 30 minutes away from Rochester. And well, I guess before the abuse, Michael Davis was called by the stake president, because we know the stake president makes the call for Elders Quorum President, called Michael Davis to be the Elders Quorum President in the Casson branch. And what we know now from court records and from testimony is that Michael Davis was had a lot of interaction with youth and young men in the branch. He was going on temple trips with them, organizing and going on temple trips with them, helping to prepare and pass the sacrament. He had organized a Book of Mormon reading challenge for the young men that came out in the court case. So there was obvious interaction and some sort of authority over the young men in this branch. And I think we all know, if you've served in a branch before or been a member in a branch, everybody helps out, right? Everyone kind of pitches in here and there. So there's like no calling that, you're just the Elders Quorum President. If you're the Elders Quorum President, you're going to highly likely going to help with, a youth activity or, a youth dance, or help out, in primary, whatever, because everyone just kind of needs to do that in a branch. I know when I was branch president, we were short a lot of members, and people had to fill in wherever they could. So he was Elders Quorum President, and then
can I just jump?
Yeah.
Like, as a panel, I just want to quickly discuss this. Like, first of all, I guess, Michael, you haven't been able to maybe do some sleuthing to figure out, like, let's just say, so there's 10 years. How many years between his probation violation and the actual offense in Minnesota? How many years?
10.
So I guess in theory, he could have been excommunicated. Let's just say, best case scenario for the church, he was excommunicated, his records were annotated, but then he went through multi-year repentance process and then repented, showed himself worthy, then somehow got rebaptized. I don't know. I mean, it's possible that's what happened during those 10 years, but still, like, I'm just trying to scratch my head how this dude becomes Elders Quorum President with that history.
Yeah, because if his membership's marked, even if he got rebaptized, it will supposedly continue to stay marked.
Right.
Do any of you have thoughts on that? Like, how this could have happened? I mean, I guess we've already kind of covered it, but I'm just stunned. You go from felon on the national registry, sex offenders registry for life, to Elders Quorum President in a Mormon church with $200-300 billion of resources. You think they do well, number one, that their own internal computer systems would prevent this, and that they could afford background checks for leaders who are interacting with youth. Am I being unfair here? Am I being unreasonable?
No.
No, there's a thought that just came to my mind right now as I was reading as I read the handbook, and I was reading it yesterday. Something, it says that the church complies to, in wherever state in the United States requires for an ecclesiastical leader to have a background check, the church complies with that, and wherever state it doesn't require it, they won't do it. I wonder why it's that. And my guess is Minnesota does not require it.
They don't.
And because I think the sheriff talked a little bit about that. And my only guess for that is that maybe background checks are undermining the power of discernment that church leaders really believe they have. So can you imagine a scenario where the stake president and his counselors pray and get a name to call an Elders Quorum President? They run, and they all feel like they got inspiration or revelation that that's the person that's supposed to be a branch president or a bishop or whatever, and then they run a background check and it comes back that they are a registered sex offender. How that might affect, their belief in their real power of discernment. I mean, this is highly speculative, but I think that could be one of the reasons why the church won't comply. Because, like you're saying, John, they have infinite amount of resources to start doing this, right? All over the place. So,
I mean, it's such a simple, and it's such a simple procedure that could happen that could protect kids all throughout the church. So simple.
The Boy Scouts are no model for protecting children, but even the Boy Scouts have background checks of their leaders, right?
Right.
So that's outrageous. I mean, here's a couple other options. One is that there's so many sexual abusers within Mormonism that they're worried that there wouldn't be enough men to staff leadership positions if they did background checks. Another is that there's so many known family members or friends or whatever that if they started doing background checks, there would be so much gossip that all the members would find out because of ward council and other things, that all the members would become immediately aware that there were predators among them. I can imagine them not wanting all the members to know in a ward who the predators are.
That would be a horrible thing, wouldn't it?
All of this, I know. That's what I'm thinking sitting here. I'm like, yeah, like all the parents of the youth would go in on paying for any kind of background check to be done for the leaders of their children. I would. And also like, let's like, I'm done with the word discernment. I'm sorry, men and patriarchy, but you don't have discernment. If you're using that discernment to be in charge of who gets to be with my child, it's not going to happen. It's not happening anymore. And if I was a parent, actually I still am a parent in the LDS religion technically, I would make a stance in your ward to make sure that every youth leader has a background check, and if there's something found, they're not put in at any time in any future calling with the youth ever.
And not just you, like primary, young men's,
yeah.
young women's. I think Elders Quorum Presidency needs to apply, bishoprics, and probably Relief Society presidencies, and any home teacher, visiting teacher, or minister. Like, wouldn't they all need background checks?
Yes. Any adult that is in contact or could ever be alone with any child
Sunday school
in any
Sunday school
exactly
teachers, all that.
That's what I'm saying. That would be my one plea to members watching right now that are still active, that you have this conversation with your bishop and you come together as adults who are concerned for children and know what happens in this day and time, and understand that their discernment is not going to work. It's not going to be enough anymore. So that's my 2 cents. Sorry, I went off on a little tangent there.
No apologies necessary. We love it. RFM, we want to get you in here. Any thoughts on what's going on with how this could have happened and why we don't have a better system in place?
One of the problems that is endemic in Mormonism is the lack of knowledge about child sex offenders. And I say this because I did a podcast, this is like 5 years ago, and it was on a 1980 or 81 manual that they had for the church, which has since been lost, except there's one copy that still exists. It's titled Homosexuality. And in it talks about all the things that cause people to be homosexuals because they're not born that way. But there's also a part in it that talks about child sex offenders. And this part was especially disturbing to me because it was clear that the person who wrote this, and of course it's from the church, it's Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, it's the official position at the time, is the idea that a child sex offender can repent of child abuse such that they're cured. That it's sort of like, I don't know, stealing something from a store and you can make restitution for it and promise not to do it again. And you go on and, slate's clean. You can go on with your progress in the church. But there's lots of sins like theft that a person can repent of and lose the desire to do it again. But research tends to show overwhelmingly that child sex offenders are not like that. Once you have developed the urge for sexual contact with minors, that doesn't just go away. It's not something that can be repented of. And I think that the church should learn that lesson. And it's what you, John, and Jen were talking about. It should be forever that you are not going to say, okay, you've repented, so now we can put you in as a youth Sunday school teacher, because everything's hunky-dory now and we can put it in the past. I think that's one of the problems that may factor into what happened in this case.
Kind of an overconfidence in the atonement, right? That the atonement somehow can fix a sexual predator.
Well, yeah, you could look at it that way, or I think that's a similar way of saying what I was saying, that there's just a massive lack of understanding among the lay leadership of the church as to the predilections of sex offenders. What do you think about that, by the way, Michael Benjamin? Do you see that too?
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree with what you said.
Yeah. I mean, another option is that they just don't see abuse being that bad. Like, okay, of course they don't want it, but maybe they just don't think it's a huge deal. But the thing that I'm confused about RFM is, wouldn't if we just assumed the church cared a lot about its image and its money, wouldn't it be in the church's best interest to background check everyone and to be really hard-nosed about keeping predators away from potential victims? Wouldn't it be in their public image and financial interest to be really hard-nosed about this because of the legal risks and the financial risks?
One would think
something.
No, one would think so. I mean, it's the same reason that you have the sheets in the bathrooms at Target, where the employees go in and clean up regularly, and they put the time they cleaned up, and then they put their initials or their signature there, right? So there's documentation as to how often it's cleaned up, so that if someone comes in there and wants to pretend to do a slip and fall and sue Target, then they've got documentation in order to help defend against it. So yes, I think that your idea is a good one, and it not only protects the children, which does seem to be a secondary consideration for the church. It really does. But it would also help protect the church. And I'm not exactly sure why they haven't gotten the memo. And maybe it does get back to the idea of the spiritual gift of discernment, and that somehow doing a background check undercuts that.
Yeah. And I do really think there's something to this idea that if someone's, if someone being placed on a felony list or on a predator list is forever, and if someone's background checked would forever until they die keep them away from any calling or keep them away from church service, from the church's standpoint, the person was forgiven because they went to the bishop and did restitution, were forgiven, maybe even got rebaptized, had their membership revoked. There would be a mismatch between the church's conclusion that the atonement had worked in that person's life and they were forgiven. There would be a difference between that and what the background check would probably allow, right? And so I think the church would always want its determination of someone's worthiness and the ultimate infinite power of the atonement to always trump whatever a background check might find. So they want to keep priesthood authority primal, and any background check or any other filter secondary
or primary.
Primal.
No, something happened here. Something fell through the cracks. And let's just talk about the membership records. Either it wasn't annotated in the first instance, or the state president in Minnesota didn't look at it, or if he did, he thought, well, who cares? It's been a long time. It's fine. Right. He's only the Elders Quorum President. Elders Quorum President, what do they have to do with kids? They're over the elders. So somebody dropped the ball, and this was the result.
Okay. All right. Well, I just wanted to explore that. Gerardo.
Just really quick, wanted to show from the handbook of instructions. This is the updated version 2020, and talks about the power of discernment for bishops. It says, to help them fulfill the role, bishops and stake presidents are blessed with the spiritual gift of discernment. This gift helps them discern truth, understand a member's heart, and identify his or her needs. And it cites scriptures, 1 Kings 3:6-12, and Doctrine and Covenants 46:27-28. And this is under point 31.1.7 by the interviews. So this is what bishops and stake prisoners are taught, right? That they have this power to discern people's hearts.
Yeah.
and truth.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and continue with the story. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Michael, but we had to touch on that while, in the middle of the story, just because I'm dumbfounded that this guy's Elders Quorum president in your state.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
Hey, Michael,
So-
let me interrupt you again. And
please.
let me just go ahead and say the backdrop for this is that the church comes out every time this happens and says, hey, we've got the gold standard in protecting kids from sexual abusers at church. That happened several years ago. Do you remember that? We have the gold standard.
Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
Yeah, this doesn't look very gold to me.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry, Michael.
No, you're good. So he, so he's Elders Quorum president. He has all this interaction with youth that we found out through the court. He's taking youth on temple trips. He's blessing and, preparing, passing the sacrament. And he's also in the midst of this, grooming young men. So in particular, this victim, but also it came out in court, was grooming another young man. So buying gifts, having this young man over to his house, playing video games, basically, just the typical grooming process. And in the midst of this, it's interesting that in this came out in a restraining order that was filed, that in February 2019, so the abuse occurred in December 2018. In February 2019, the branch president is concerned about the relationship between Michael Davis and this young man, and actually talks to the young man about, you're spending too much time with Mr. Davis, and he was concerned that this relationship was inappropriate. So it begs the question: Did he know something? Why was he so concerned about this relationship? And then
why didn't he go? Why did he go to the minor and not to the adult?
Well, then, so he did then later in February go and talk with the minor and the minor's parents about the concerns, and then also spoke with Michael Davis one-on-one about his concerns. But at no point either was any sort of likely because there wasn't any clear abuse that had come forward, but there was no report to anybody about this relationship, right? This concerning relationship and how much time they were spending together. But obviously the branch president had concerns, expressed those concerns to the victim, his parents, and talked to Mr. Davis about it. So that was in February. And then in March, that's when Mr. Davis and the victim were pulled over because, and this came out in court as well. Michael Davis was allowing the young man to drive his car. So he was kind of like sitting in the middle section of the two front seats and leaning over and driving Michael Davis's car. And so he wasn't seatbelted. And so that's when he got pulled over.
I think
Michael?
the wording is steering.
Yeah. Can I throw in, that was February 17th of 2019.
Yes. When he got pulled over.
Yes.
Yes. Yep. And so, I was leaning over and steering the car, got pulled over. And when the police officer ran Michael Davis's information, discovered that he was a lifetime registered sex offender, and was concerned, what is this guy doing in a car with a 13-year-old, by themselves? So,
how old was the victim?
He was 13.
13. Okay.
Yep. Because he was in Young Men's program, and So the police officer called the parent. Parent came to pick him up. Police officer told the parent about Michael Davis's background as being a registered sex offender, and then later at the end of March, beginning of April, the young man finally disclosed the abuse that had happened in December. And so that's when Michael Davis was arrested on April 3rd, 2019.
Michael, that's very interesting to me because of what you said about the branch president being concerned about the time that the victim is spending with Michael Davis, and yet apparently still never does anything to check his background.
Right.
Because this was a shock to the parents, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. They had no idea. So then he's arrested. And then that's when, over the last, 3 years now, basically, it's, going to court. There's, trials. Trials are postponed because of various reasons, including new evidence that came out. One time it was postponed because of the pandemic and rising COVID cases here. There was also, in the midst of all of this, and I guess this is the important part, where the defendant, the defense attorney, wanted the charges dismissed because of the position of authority question. So all along, the whole time, there's been this question about, was Michael Davis in a position of authority? The charges he was charged with were specific to sexual abuse crimes by a person in a position of authority. And so because there was the stance by the defense attorney that Michael Davis wasn't in a position of authority, he tried to file a motion and get the whole case dismissed, claiming that, no, he wasn't in a position of authority. He had no direct authority over youth, no, kind of supervisory role over youth. The judge initially dismissed or denied that motion, and the trial went on. And then,
Hey, Michael.
Yeah.
Before we really finish out discussing the case, I want to pause and talk about your involvement parallel to the case happening.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
When did are you a member of the stake?
I'm a member of the same stake. Yeah. So the Casson branch is in the Rochester stake.
Okay. And so your Warder branch is how far from the Casson Warder branch?
Like 20 to 30 minutes.
Okay. So this is not super far from where you live.
No.
But it's not you're in a Warder branch.
I'm in a ward.
You're in a ward. Casson's a branch.
Yep.
So the abuse happens in 2018. When did you find out about it? You.
2019, when it came out in the news. So when he was arrested, it hit the news. So in April of 2019 is when I became aware of it.
Okay, so 5 months after the abuse occurs, 4 or 5 months after, you find out.
Correct.
Okay. But before we talk about it going to court, did like the stake president tell everyone in the stake? Was everyone notified? Do you know if anything was done to protect branch members, other stake members? It is a stake calling. Elders Quorum President is a stake calling. Well, and this is, I'm now thinking of Kolby Reddish's case and how Kolby learned about this and tried to talk to the stake president about how to keep stake members safe. What can you tell us about how the church is handling it once this breaks as a news story? Yeah.
So basically, they released a statement similar to what Gerardo mentioned earlier, right? That the church doesn't condone abuse. And they released that statement publicly to the press, but there was no announcement within the stake. There was no email sent. The Casson branch had, or maybe they still have, a Facebook page, for their branch. I think it's called Friends of the Casson Branch. And somebody had posted the news article on the Facebook page, and people started kind of questioning and commenting, like, how did this happen? Why, how come nobody knew he was a registered sex offender? And very quickly that was taken down. So someone in leadership asked for all those messages in that article to be taken down. So it was the message, the implicit message that was sent out was, don't talk about this, don't post about it. Right. And there was nothing, like I said, from the stake or even the branch, that
it's like, don't ask questions, right?
Yeah.
Don't ask questions. Don't talk about it. It's almost as if they want no one to know that it happened, and no one to be aware that it happened, no one to know who was involved, and no one to question how it's being handled. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
even already, like, someone already put it on the Facebook page, they're going to ask for it to be taken down after the it's already out there. Like that's like another step.
Yeah.
That's like another step. If it's already out there and then they're asking for it to be taken down and no one to talk about it, that's no.
Yeah.
Like that's, yeah. I
Why is
don't
it?
know. It's making me upset.
Yeah, Jen, that gets into the other aspect that
Yeah.
comes into play here, which is that we don't want the church to look bad.
Yeah.
And if there's an Elders Quorum president or other member associated with the church who does something bad, we want to put the kibosh on that so that people don't find out, because it would interfere with the missionary effort.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so let's put a lid on that, and let's like keep the church's reputation okay and the men in patriarchy okay, and let's just sacrifice all our children.
I will
That
tell.
makes a lot of sense. LDS Church. That
It
makes
has-
a lot of sense.
It has been my experience that whenever the reputation or good name of the LDS Church comes into conflict with the welfare of the members, it is always the good name of the church that's going to win.
And that
Always.
people should really think about that sentence that RFM just said.
It's actually on the handbook of instructions as well.
It just makes me
It's
so
not-
angry. Like I want to cry and scream and call every stake president. I don't know. Reach
Yeah.
every member. Like it's just like what organization do you want to be a part of where your children are dead last?
Yeah.
Like I don't. I don't know. I'm sorry. Ooh.
Well, this is serious stuff.
Now,
Hold
I
on,
do
hold on
have-
really quickly. If
Yeah.
I'm also in the minds of the church leaders, and of course, this just flies in the, Kolby talked about this. This flies in the face of Jesus's admonition that if you hurt one of the little ones, it's better that like a stone cement block be tied around your millstone and dragged down to the bottom of the ocean. Like Jesus wasn't big on abusing children. So like he made his priorities known, but I can see the stake president or the branch president or other leaders thinking, whoa, if a member sees that an Elders Quorum president who's actually a convicted felon and on the National Register sex offenders list was called as Elders Quorum president, they're going to wonder how that happened. It's going to make them question my inspiration as a stake president, my judgment as a stake president, the discern. We've already talked about this topic, but we're just now feet on the ground. It's going to make them question the stake president's judgment because it's a stake calling, and the branch president's discernment because he's the equivalent of a bishop.
And they should.
Yeah, but I mean, they don't want that, right?
Right.
Not to mention if it gets out more, it's going to damage reputation. So anyway, I just wanted to highlight that. I'm just trying to put why would they be deleting these Facebook posts?
Yeah.
It's certainly going to cause potentially a faith crisis in the membership of the branch and stake.
Weaken the faith of the members. That's the
Yeah.
wording on the handbook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah. So my involvement and kind of what happened with me and the response from the leaders of the church. One piece that's important to get to that question is, so there's this stance by the defense attorney that Michael Davis was not in a position of authority. They filed a motion to try to have the case dismissed. Like I said, the judge denied that motion to have the case dismissed and basically said, we're going to have a jury decide if Mr. Davis was in a position of authority. That was in March of 2020. And then for some reason in April of 2020, and I don't know, RFM, if you have insight into this, the judge reopened.
Was it 2021, by the way?
No, it's 2020.
Okay.
Yep, April of 2020. The judge reopens this motion to allow the stake president and the branch president to submit affidavits. And the defense attorney actually specifically says to the judge that he wants to get affidavits from the church leaders to support this claim that Michael Davis wasn't in a position of authority. So the judge reopens this motion to allow the stake president and branch president to either testify, I think, or submit an affidavit.
Okay, Michael, I want to ask RFM a quick question to then lead to what you are about to say. Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah.
RFM, let's go back to that April 2019 when the guy's arrested and the guy's arrested and this becomes a news story. It's certain at that point the branch president and or the stake president call the church hotline. Kurt McConkie, starts speaking with the stake president, and they're like, "We've got a problem." And RFM, you're smirking. Is it because I said erected? Is that why you're laughing? I apologize.
Please continue. I'll just try and get a grip.
Okay. I apologize for that. So as a legal kind of consultant to this podcast, stake president's talking to Kurt McConkie, and they're talking legal strategy at this point, right? So they're thinking, all right, we've got an Elders Quorum president, we've got a member of the branch, there's been abuse. What's our case? What's our strategy? And can you imagine a strategy where Kurt McConkie advises the stake president to go with this line of reasoning that an Elders Quorum president has nothing to do with youth? Like, or how would you see that Kurt McConkie stake president strategy unfolding legally?
Well, I think that the safest way to talk about it is what did happen, because I don't know about any phone calls that were made or any communications made between the parties. But it was 2020. I double checked. You're right, Michael. So in early 2020, the defense brings a motion to dismiss the charges because all of the counts, and they keep adding counts, but all the counts are under this position of authority.
Correct.
And that may or may not become important later, especially on appeal when this gets reversed. But yeah.
I do want to say that the charges originally were not based on a position of authority.
Originally, there were two counts. It was for the same incident. The first count was charged as a position of authority. The second incident was for the same act, but it was charged in the alternative without the position of authority.
Right.
Yes, I noticed that too.
And then at the end, there were 4, all of them with the position of authority. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
And there was a 5th one as well.
And I'm just wondering at what point are the Mormon church leaders starting to think that they need to join the defense team? You know what I mean? How does that happen, RFM, if you even have a theory about that?
Well, how it happens is sometime between the first time the motion was brought in early 2020 and then denied by the judge who took it under advisement and issued an order denying the motion, and November of the same year, 2020, when apparently the parties agreed that the defense could bring the same motion supplemented by 2 declarations, one declaration from the stake president and one declaration from the branch president. And they're actually identical to each other,
Completely
except
identical.
for the names, right?
Yep, completely identical. Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to put those up there now so you can see what they say, because really they're not saying a whole lot. What they're talking about is theoretical.
Slide 7, John.
Okay. All right, here we go.
Can you make it full screen?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's affidavit of Randall Thomas. He is the stake president.
Correct.
Which one?
That one right there.
That one
affidavit
right there.
of Randall.
Full
Yeah, it says stake president affidavit to the side, so somebody's already labeled that.
Oh, Gerardo's.
Gerardo's?
Go ahead. Okay.
Huh?
Gerardo's screen?
Is this full screen, Gerardo?
Oh, sorry. That's my you're showing my screen. Sorry.
Yeah.
Let me remove that from the stream. Okay, there we
so
go.
we're doing the affidavit of the stake president, right?
Yeah.
Right. And
Okay,
so
here we go.
great. What it says, I'll read off my hard copy if that's okay.
Please.
Okay. I, Randall Thomas, make this affidavit in response to a subpoena from the above named defendant in relation to his omnibus motion regarding the issue of position of authority. So right off, he wants to make sure that he's doing it because he's being ordered to. Although that seems kind of odd. I have no idea how they do things in Minnesota. All I know is that that's really odd language here in Washington, because it's like he's making an effort to show, oh, well, I don't really want to do this, but I have to because there's a subpoena to issue a declaration. Okay. Anyway, number 1, my name is Randall Thomas, and I make this declaration. Oh, he says it again. In response to a subpoena. That's how important it is. We're going to say it twice. Lawyers never repeat themselves. No, make this declaration in response to a subpoena from the defendant, Michael Davis. 2, I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And at the time Michael Davis attended our church, I was in the capacity of stake president of the Rochester, Minnesota stake. 3, Michael Davis held the role, that's not very LDS language, is it?
Yeah.
He held the role of Elders Quorum President. I would think it would be, I don't know, the calling.
Yeah.
So we want to get away from it being calling. By the way, this is very artfully worded. And I don't know if first off, it's clear that somebody else wrote this for at least one of these gentlemen. And probably
We have
both,
an
since they're
email.
word for word. Go ahead.
We have
Talk
an
to me.
we have an email by a 70 who admitted to Michael Benjamin that the stake president and the branch president were counseled by church lawyers. Is that right?
They were. Of
Yes.
course they were. Yeah.
Yep.
But that makes a lot of sense to me, because this is being drafted in such a way as to distance the church as much as possible from any civil liability. Because what's going on here is that, well, let me read the rest of it, okay? And then I'll tell you what's going on here. Michael Davis held the role of Elders Quorum President. His duties associated with being the Elders Quorum President did not generally involve direct supervision or participation with minors at the church. 4, I am unaware of any supervisory or leadership positions the defendant has ever had in our church wherein he would have been in a position of direct authority over minors. Number 5, accordingly, I do not believe that the defendant would ever have been in a position of direct authority over minors. And that's the last paragraph. It ends with, I declare under penalty of perjury that everything I've stated in this document is true and correct. That's a big load of nothing, really. All it's saying is, I don't have any direct knowledge of whether this person had any authority over minors, but it didn't generally involve it. I'm unaware of any supervisory position over minors, and therefore I do not believe that the defendant would have ever been in a position of direct authority over minors. It's not a surprise to me that these declarations, which mirror each other, didn't really do the trick on the second time this motion to dismiss was brought.
Yeah.
But it looks to me like these are drafted in such a way as to try and distance the church from the actions that were done by the defendant here in order to protect them from civil liability. So actually, I don't see the church coming in on the side of the accused at that time, now convicted, because that was last Friday he was convicted.
Right.
I don't see them coming in on his side in order to come in on his side. I see them coming in on his side because here their interests align.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that the prosecutor has charged all these counts as a position of authority. Let me back up here and just make this clear. I think it probably is to most people. You don't have to be in a position of authority over somebody to make what was alleged here illegal. Yeah, it's still against the law to do that if you're older than a 13-year-old, more than 48 months older in Minnesota, apparently, and you do this kind of stuff with a 13-year-old, yeah, it's against the law. It's just that if you're in a position of authority over this 13-year-old and you do what you did, then it's a more serious felony.
Right.
So I just wanted to mention that. So what they're trying to say is, okay, position of authority has been alleged, and now we're bringing in these declarations from the branch president and stake president to say, hey, there is no position of authority here, as much as they're able to. And I think these are very weak sauce kind of declarations, but they're trying to distance the church, saying the child was not under the direct authority of Michael Davis, the Elders Quorum President, because if he were under his direct authority, then the church is liable civilly in a subsequent lawsuit.
And I think that's key. And so if it's okay, RFM, I want to ask a quick question and ask you to speculate, which I know you don't like to do. But given that you have experience in this sort of thing, how do we imagine this conversation happens where the stake president calls Kurt McConkie? What is the conversation that happens that leads to a Mormon stake president and a Mormon branch president joining the defense team with sworn affidavits, trying to help the defendant's case be successful? Tell us how that conversation might happen, because that blows me away that like special witnesses of Christ or special leaders who represent Christ are ending up on the legal team of a known sexual predator to try and keep a successful prosecution from happening. How does that happen?
Well, if I'm the defense attorney, I think it was Thomas Brown was the individual who was representing Michael Davis. If I'm the defense attorney and I'm in this position, I'm reaching out to the
Okay.
branch president and I'm reaching out to the stake president to see if I can find any information from them that will help my case. And then I'm the one trying to get declarations from them. Hopefully they'd be better than these, but regardless, I expect that this was as good as Thomas Brown could get them to sign their names to. So,
So the defense attorneys, let's speculate, is reaching out to the stake president and the branch president saying, hey, I want to get a lower sentence for my client.
well, I want to get the charges dismissed.
I want to get the charges dismissed, which is awful, or a lower sentence.
Let me tell you, it's a great feeling.
Yeah, if you're on that side. I mean, it's funny and it's dark, right?
Oh, yes, very dark.
I mean, I understand the legal, the kind of the attorney perspective, RFM, but then it gets really sobering when we're talking about a kid who's being sexually abused, right? And we're trying to get, from the kids and the parents' perspective, we're trying to get the perpetrator off, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So here's how I imagine it happening. Defense attorney contacts branch president, defense attorney contacts stake president, wants to get a declaration. Stake president, branch president get together, they get concerned. So they call their upline to find out what it is that they should do.
They call the
They
Kurt
get-
McConkie hotline, right?
Well, no, well, maybe, but they call to their area authority. And then eventually they get put in contact with them, I would imagine. So then the discussions are had as to what they are able to say, how they should say it. And it really looks like the church is being distanced. I mean, why would they write, he had the role of Elders Quorum President? It's only to avoid saying he had the calling of Elders Quorum President. Because when you put calling in there, well, who called him?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that seems to be really obvious to me. That's like in red neon. So that's how I would speculate that this happened.
So Kurt McConkie says, all right, stake president and branch president, cooperate with the defense attorney. Here's the boilerplate text for because they've done a million of these. Here's the boilerplate text for the affidavit. You both need to sign. We, Kurt McConkie, approve this. And now this could be filed as a part of the defense team, right? To help get the perpetrator off of a conviction.
These declarations are not designed to get the perpetrator off. They're designed to protect the church. I was emphasizing certain words in these 5-paragraph declarations, and I'll do it again here so you can understand how weak these are. They're very weak on protecting Michael Davis. They're very strong on protecting the church. Paragraph 3, Michael Davis, Elders Quorum President, did not generally involve direct supervision. See that? Did not generally. Well, if it's generally, there are exceptions because it's not a rule. It's just generally, right? Number 4, I am unaware of any supervisory or leadership positions that he had over minors. And number 5, accordingly, I do not believe that the defendant would have ever been in a position of direct authority over minors. I mean, why is the stake president? I understand because he's, doing his stake stuff and he's not always going to be in the branch. But you've got the branch president, who's Brent Larson, who signs an identical declaration to the one I just read. And why doesn't he have anything more factual that is better for the defense than just this kind of mealy-mouthed garbage?
Yeah, you would think that the branch president would know more, right?
Yes, he's on the ground. He can see all this stuff. And apparently, I mean, there are some times when you don't want your witness to say everything they know because it doesn't help you. But I noticed that there's nothing in this document that talks about him being so concerned about this victim spending time with Michael Davis that he talked to his parents about it.
That was my
Right.
thought too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this may be the truth, but it's not the whole truth.
And even though these were written to protect the church, they were still used by the defense attorney to try to get the case dismissed, right? So they were the key kind of components of the defense attorney's pleading of the court to have this case dismissed.
And in fact, the branch president ends up being in the defense witness list, right? As one of the witnesses that could have been called by the defense lawyers.
The other thing that concerns me, and I don't know if this is what you were getting at, John, about this moment in the trial or the court case, is when the defense attorney reached out to the branch president and the stake president to ask for these affidavits, why didn't they say, like, no, we can't say that he wasn't in a position of authority. We know that he was in contact with youth on temple trips. We know he was in contact with youth, helping to prepare the sacrament and pass the sacrament. We know he had made this Book of Mormon reading challenge and told the defense attorney, we can't testify to the fact that he wasn't in a position of authority, because he kind of was, right? He was interacting with youth. And that was a concern for me, is, morally, how come they didn't take that higher ground and stand up for the victim and say, no, we're gonna testify for the victim and support the victim and not the offender.
Yeah, like I was just wondering whether this branch president affidavit is just flat out dishonest, right?
Yeah.
The branch president was misleading and or lying in this affidavit, knowing better. But then I can't resist mentioning the idea that exact honesty is required when a 14-year-old boy or girl has to talk about their sexual practices to a grown man bishop behind closed doors. That's when exact honesty is important. But when the church is trying to protect its good name and its treasure, then exact honesty is more flexible, and you can mislead or deceive or use clever wording or pay the right attorneys to prevent you from being fully honest when the church's interests are at stake. It feels hypocritical. It's not the exact honesty I was taught as a Mormon, right?
Yeah. And RFM, you brought up a good point, with the branch president's affidavit is, if he did have all these concerns about their inappropriate relationship, why didn't that come out, right? Why didn't he speak to that in his affidavit, that they were spending too much time together, and that Michael Davis was, in this position of authority or mentorship over this young man?
Yeah, the branch president's really on the hot seat with that additional fact, because he signed off on this. You can read this and you're not really going to find a fact in this affidavit. And that's what it's supposed to contain.
Yeah.
This really doesn't have anything by way of facts. It's just generally and not aware of, and it's my belief.
Yeah.
But I also think, once they presented this from the branch president, especially, and the state president, they've already identified these people for the prosecution. I'm not sure why they didn't send out a detective to interview both of these people. But of course, they didn't need it. They won. So, who am I to criticize?
Well, I also want to just state the obvious, that if the church starts with the premise that it's against abuse of any kind and that it supports obeying, honoring, and sustaining the law, you would think the church would have an interest in the plaintiff getting justice against the defendant, that they would want the legal processes to result in the defendant serving time and being punished for the abuse that the church claims to be against. The church wouldn't be aiding the defense to get the case excused so that justice couldn't be served, right?
No, you're right. And can I contrast this with the church's policy when it comes to two members of the ward getting divorced?
Sure.
You know what the policy is, right?
Tell us.
You don't get involved with the criminal, with the divorce case. You don't get involved, one side or the other. That's the policy of the church. And so here you've got a criminal case, which is between a member of the church and against another member of the church. And apparently that policy is not going to apply in this situation, at least in Minnesota.
Wow.
Well, and Gerardo, you have the letter from the First Presidency that has a similar statement, right? That tells leaders to not get involved in legal matters of church members. I think that's one of the slides as well.
Yeah. So we've got the affidavits. Where should we go next? Should we go to the general authority
So yeah, this is just to show. This is an email from Elder Kerr, from an Area 70.
Jeffrey J. Kerr
Yeah,
in Area 70, right?
and he writes to Benjamin because I think Michael Benjamin was asking him about, you can tell the story probably.
Yeah, I
right?
was reaching out to higher ups, just trying to understand why did the branch president and stake president, why are they involved in this legal matter when leaders are told not to be involved? Why did they submit these affidavits? How did this come to be? So he actually responded to me, which I appreciated, and confirmed, as you see there. And he actually gets the bishop's name wrong. It's Bishop Larson, not Bishop Fleming. Bishop
And
Fleming,
he's a branch president.
and he's a branch president. Yeah. Bishop Fleming was my bishop, so I think he was getting confused. So he says, President Thomas, and it should be Branch President Larson, have followed the direction of Church Legal Counsel in the matter you referenced. And the matter that I referenced was the affidavits that they submitted.
It's always nice when somebody's writing something to protect two individuals and ends up throwing legal counsel for the church under the bus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, really quickly, Michael, if it's okay, like I'm reading this email from Jeffrey J. Kerr, Area Authority of the Church of Jesus Christ. He goes on to write, I've also visited with the stake president about your access to church resources. Your local leaders have previously explained the reason you do not currently have access to church resources. You will need to continue to work with your local leaders to address this matter. Can you tell us what's going on there?
Yeah, so that's a great segue into, so after these affidavits were submitted to the court, I sent out an email. So the branch president from the Caston branch I don't know if he got released because of what was happening or if it was just his time to be released. Anyway, he got released and was moved over to our ward because he's actually a member of our ward. So he got moved over to our ward and was put in a calling as a youth Sunday school teacher in our ward. And I had some serious concerns about that. I had concerns that we have
In your ward, Michael?
in my ward. Yep.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I had some concerns that we have a leader who is still actively involved in this sex abuse case, right? He submitted an affidavit. He's a witness. So that was one concern I had. I had another concern that he was, defending a sexual perpetrator. And I didn't think it was appropriate for someone who was still involved in this legal matter and defending a sexual perpetrator to be teaching a youth Sunday school class. So I emailed the parents of that youth Sunday school class, just informing them of the case that was going on, of the fact that he had submitted this affidavit.
How did you get their emails, Michael?
Through the online church directory? Yeah,
LDS tools or whatever.
LDS tools, yeah.
Okay.
And it was very short, just very infactual. Just I gave them the facts so they were aware of what was going on. I didn't, badmouth anybody. I wasn't negative in my email. I just wanted to inform them and bring some awareness to what was happening, and then they could make their own decision about, what they wanted to do.
What's your logic there, Michael? Why would you be concerned? It's the former branch president, right?
Right.
Why would you be concerned, or why would you think a parent might be concerned? I mean, so you're saying that if the former branch president is teaching children and also simultaneously helping to defend an accused sexual abuser, what might happen to the kids?
I don't know if anything would happen to them. I just didn't think it was appropriate for him to be teaching youth in that particular moment and still being involved in this legal case. I didn't have any concern that he was going to do anything. I just didn't think it showed well.
You're saying it's morally bankrupt to
Yeah. Yeah. I think
it was a lack of character.
Yeah. And so I don't think it was just good for him to be doing that under the circumstances. Right.
You were maybe you felt angry that a church leader would be siding with on the defense team of a sexual predator.
Yeah, I was concerned, and if anything, let's not have him have a calling right until this whole matter is over.
Think about this too, John. Like this affidavits that the branch president, stake president submitted were literally used to like get the whole case dismissed. Like whatever the branch president signed and submitted could have or had the potential to at least in the defense view, to completely drop the charges against an abuser. So I would be concerned too, I think.
So I sent that email July 21st, 2021. On July 23rd, 2021, the stake president calls Salt Lake headquarters and has my membership record completely suspended and deactivated. I didn't realize it though until July 25th, 2021, because I went into, I don't know if I think I was looking up a Sunday school lesson or something for a Sunday school class. I mean,
Did the state president talk to you first?
No, there was no conversation with me, no telling me, hey, I didn't appreciate the email you sent. Will you stop doing that? Stop sending emails. There was no conversation.
Here's why I wouldn't want you to do that.
Right. Yep.
That's still using it for a purpose within the church. Like it's still like you weren't like taking their emails and giving them to some MLM or whatever.
You weren't.
People literally do.
You were like, here, let me help you protect your children.
Right.
Let me give you the information and you make a judgment call as a parent of your child.
Exactly.
It wasn't, you weren't misusing them, I guess is what I'm saying. You weren't misusing them.
Right. But that's their claim, is that I misused. Yeah. That I misused church resources.
It's not a misuse.
Yeah. For that reason.
This is a big stay in your lane move by the church.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, there was no warning. There was no conversation with me. There was no, hey, stop doing that. So on July 25th, 2021, I was logging in to read a Sunday school lesson because, I'm still, even though I said earlier, I'm not an active member, I still, participate and do things within the church. So I was trying to log in and it kept coming up that my password wasn't working, or it wasn't working. And so I kept trying, and then I tried to reset my password, and eventually it came up that my membership record couldn't even be found. It said your membership record is not available or not found. Please contact, I can't remember if it said, tech support or church headquarters or something to that effect.
I mean, that's the type of thing they do when they excommunicate you, is they shut down your LDS Tools account. So they're treating you like an apostate at that point.
Right. Without any of the formal action of doing so, right?
And without even talking to you.
Right. So then for several weeks and months, it felt like I was calling church headquarters trying to figure out what happened. Well, and so that's how I found out he had suspended my account, as I called church headquarters. And they let me know I was literally on the phone for like hours with different people. They kept passing me around trying to figure out what had happened. And then finally I got to somebody and they looked in some sort of note and said, oh yeah, it looks like here your stake president suspended your account. You'll have to talk with him and to get it resolved. And for months I tried reaching out to him, emailing him, asking, hey, can we talk about this? Can I please get my membership record account reinstated, because it has all my notes and my journals, my family history. They're all those accounts are connected right now. And so I just wanted that back. I wanted to be able to, do work on family history and look at my notes and things like that. And there was never any response. The only response I got was from the stake clerk saying, stake president has already told you that, why your church, why you have no access to the LDS tools, and just it was a very blanket statement. It didn't really help me get anything back.
But he hadn't talked to you.
Well, he had. Sorry, do you have the email, Gerardo? Is that one of the slides I gave you?
No, no, I don't have an email from the stake president.
Here, I think I have it here. So he says that the use of church resources, including private member information, is a privilege. If members of the church misuse that privilege, access to those resources may be discontinued. Because you inappropriately use confidential email address information from member tools to send an inaccurate and defamatory message, which is not true because it wasn't inaccurate and it wasn't
What?
defamatory. Your access to membership resources has been deactivated. So that was, I guess, when he, through the state clerk, let me know why it had been deactivated.
What is the date of that email, Michael?
July 26th.
Okay, so it's just 5 days later.
Yeah. Yep.
Inaccurate and defamatory.
And a misuse of church emails, which
Right.
not true.
So that's what Elder Kerr is referring to in his email. Because I had gone up the chain trying to just resolve the situation, just because I wasn't getting any response from anybody, and so I was trying to just resolve and get my personal property back.
Did you reply to this email?
To Elder Kerr?
No, to the
From your
state
state president.
Yeah. I replied saying, that I understand that that's what you think, but can we please have a conversation about how do I need to get this back? What needs to happen? I think I said in one email as well, how are you taking these actions against me if we haven't talked, right? If we haven't had if you're taking actions against me, why isn't there a disciplinary council or something to that effect? And I just felt very ghosted by everybody. There was just never any response. So
there was never any response to your reply to the state president?
Correct.
From the state president.
Right.
Yeah, because lawyers are going to say, just don't give him any rope, to hang you with. Like, stay away from him, stay silent. They're going to be advising the state president to not interact with you.
Mm-hmm.
But it just seems really weird that this guy is like an ecclesiastical leader. He's supposed to have pastoral concern for his flock, and he's not. He's accusing you of being defamatory, of being misleading, of misusing things, but he won't even sit down with you and have a conversation about what was defamatory, what was untrue,
Yeah.
and how does it qualify as misuse. He just ghosts you.
Yeah, takes away the membership access and doesn't explain why and doesn't say what I need to do to get it back. Eventually later on, I guess RFM he does, and I'd have to find that email. But it was like months later after repeated emails to him, basically states that there needs to be time that passes and other things that need to happen before I can get it back, but never is ever specific about what needs to happen for me to get my membership access back, or at least the property that the membership account contains.
Did you eventually file a lawsuit against the church?
I did. So that's what I was getting at. So after months and months of all of that, so that was, let's see, July. I have to look at my notes here because a lot has happened. So that was July of 2021. And then in March of 2022, in January, end of January 2022, I served the stake presidency with summons and civil complaint. And then
Wait. You mentioned in your notes that you were told you were in apostasy. Have you talked to us about that?
I haven't. So I think that
you have that after the email from the stake presidency in the timeline between July and November.
Yeah. So over the years, so I guess it goes back to November of 2015 where the exclusion policy came out. That's where my shelf started to kind of break. And so ever since then, I have been vocal about concerns that I've had with church leadership and the exclusion policy and different questions and things that I've had. And so because of those Facebook posts and even in church, public questions that I've raised, both my bishop and stake presidency have told me that I'm in apostasy, and that I needed to change what I was doing. But again, I've never been called into a disciplinary council, never been disfellowshipped, excommunicated, despite them repeatedly telling me you're in apostasy, stop saying these things, stop posting these things.
So weird because they rescinded the exclusion policy. So you were speaking
Right.
out against a policy that they themselves now oppose and rescinded, and somehow that qualifies as apostasy.
Right.
Like
I
I
think-
know Mormon apostles today that were opposed to the exclusion policy. Were they in apostasy?
Yeah.
Part of what's going on here, I think, also gets into this other aspect of the culture of secrecy
Mm-hmm.
in the LDS church. And while they're doing this over here in the court case, they don't want the general membership to know about it. Even though these are public record documents because they're filed in the court case. That's how I got these myself. Anybody could go there and find them if they know to go there and find them, but they don't want the membership to know about it. So when you did that, you were threatening this culture of secrecy and their authority to determine what the members will know at the same time.
Right. Right. So yeah, so that led to filing a civil suit against the state presidency because they're essentially the ones who disabled my account and everything that my account contains. And so served them in end of January. The
That's just
civil,
because you wanted your private property, basically?
yeah, I wanted my access to my family history, my notes, my journal entries, all of the stuff that the membership account contains. And so I filed the lawsuit in March formally, and then interestingly, and this also boggles my mind, is once they were served and the suit was in action in the court, they got their own attorneys to fight the lawsuit instead of trying to work it out with me or say, hey, let's talk, let's work this out of court. They actually hired a private attorney to fight me in court, which really surprised me. But fortunately, their attorney was a super nice guy, and I feel like really kind of understood where I was coming from and was able to work with me and with them, and we were able to kind of settle out of court. Basically, we stipulated the case, and I'm still in the process of getting my information back and my notes and my journals and things like that. But it's sad that it took that, right? It took me filing a lawsuit in court to get some sort of action done.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So the case.
Back to the case. Yeah.
So the general authority, the area authority email that we shared, the basic point of that is that the area authority is acknowledging that church legal counsel is deeply involved in this entire case. Is that the main point of this email?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
This is the motion to dismiss.
Okay.
That's what's called, right? RFM?
Yes, that's what it is. It's called an omnibus order for whatever reason in Minnesota. We wouldn't call it that here, but yeah, it's a motion to dismiss.
And this is where the defense attorney mentions the affidavits and how important they are into this argument.
We better be calling them important because that's the only difference between this motion and the same motion that was brought earlier in 2020 is the addition of these two affidavits.
Right. And
What's the purpose of this document, RFM?
do you want to just RFM, do you want to explain it?
Well, it's just a motion to dismiss. By the way, let me just clarify something that may be a bit hazy at this point. There's 4 counts ultimately. By the time it goes to trial, there's 4 counts of child sex abuse under different, well, there's basically 2 that are penetration and 2 that are sexual contact. Okay, but they're all involving this 13-year-old at the time, this victim. So they're all filed as Michael Davis being in a position of authority over this kid. And they didn't have to do that. If, let's say, the heavens opened and the sun shone down and smiled upon the defense counsel in this case, and the judge granted the motion to dismiss all 4 of these charges because there wasn't enough evidence to go to a jury on the issue of position of authority. That didn't happen. But if it had, it's not the guy walks free. The prosecutor just turns around and files an amended information or a new information charging all the same crimes, but just without the position of authority part. So they'd be lesser felonies, but still very serious. So it's not like he's going to walk free. So the thing I don't understand is why the prosecutor decided to put all their eggs in the same basket of position of authority. Now they did, and they won, and we'll see what happens on appeal, but it's very skinny on this issue. And I would have thought that if I'd been the prosecutor, and different attorneys do things differently, and so I'm not trying to, criticize too much, but they can charge 4 counts under position of authority, which are the more serious felonies. And then they can, in the alternative, charge the same 4 counts without the position of authority language. All right. And all I'm saying is, if it goes up on appeal now, and the Court of Appeal says, no, there wasn't enough evidence of position of authority, which is the issue in this case. And that's why these motions were brought. It's very evident this is the issue. And if they say, no, there wasn't enough, then all 4 of those convictions, there's a 5th one, that doesn't involve that. But all 4 of those convictions, the serious charges, they get dismissed. And now it goes back down to the trial court. They're going to have another trial. Mm-hmm. Whereas if the prosecutor had done what would be more standard operating procedure, I think, and charge all 4 here and all 4 without the positions of authority, then he gets sentenced on these 4. It goes up on appeal, and let's say they all get dismissed. Okay, well, you still got these 4 that you have convictions for. So you don't have to retry the case. It just gets sent back for resentencing. But we'll see if, the prosecutor put all their eggs in this basket, and they won at trial. They defeated the motion. They won at trial. They got the jury to agree. Now we'll see what happens on appeal.
Okay.
Yeah. So this document, I just shows how the defense attorney was using the affidavits from the. Do you want to read what's highlighted? I think it's pretty self-explanatory. John, do you want to read it?
Defendant submitted 2 affidavits from church leadership. Brent Larson was the branch president of the Casson Ward at the alleged offense. Mr. Larson testified by way of affidavit and stated that defendant's duties as Elders Quorum President did not involve direct supervision or participation with minors. Similarly, Mr. Randall Thomas, who was the stake president of the Rochester, Minnesota stake, also confirmed that defendant was not in a supervisory role or had any official capacity over children at the church.
And then at the end, there's the conclusion.
Which, by the way, is not exactly what the declarations say. And I expect the judge noticed that difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then at the end, it says, nothing in this record demonstrates that David was in a position of authority over the alleged victim at the time of the perpetrated offense, making dismissal of counts 1 through 4 appropriate. Okay.
Yep. So
then,
yeah.
Denied.
Denied.
So yeah, this was denied by the judge. And then I have a few slides of screenshots of the handbook of instructions just on.
Can I say something else here that strikes me?
Go ahead.
Why are they just submitting these declarations? Why are these people not called as witnesses? This is almost kabuki theater at this point that we're going through the motions. Because, the defense can ask for this, but the prosecution doesn't have to agree to that. The prosecution can say, no, you need to call these witnesses in and subject them to cross-examination. The fact the prosecutor did not do that is indicative of the fact that the prosecutor did not see these as problematic and that it would not work. And that ended up being correct because the judge saw it the same way.
Yeah. And ended up leaving it to the jury to decide if he was in a position of authority or not. And yeah, we know the result of that.
Right.
So what does the church handbook of instructions say, Gerardo?
These are just a few screenshots I thought were important to show just about how important Elders Quorum Presidents are in branches and or wards. And this one is about presiding at sacrament meeting. And it says that the bishop presides at sacrament meeting unless a member of the stake presidency in Area 70 in this area or a general authority attends. If the bishop and his counselors are not able to attend sacrament meeting, the stake president designates who presides. Normally, he designates the Elders Quorum President. However, he could invite another priesthood holder, preferably a high priest or elder. So basically, it just shows, right, like how after the bishop, counselors,
He's number 4 in authority in the ward.
right.
Right?
He's like the Speaker of the House.
Right. Yep.
And then the next one is
This,
about
again, this is from the 2020 Church Handbook of Instructions, section 8.3.3.2. Go ahead. Ray.
Elders Quorum Presidency. The Elders Quorum President has the following responsibilities, and it says, through his service, the Elders Quorum President supports the bishop in focusing on the youth and on the
Okay.
bishop's unique responsibilities.
That's huge.
Yeah.
How is that not huge? Like it's there.
I thought that was huge. Yeah.
Yeah. Why doesn't their affidavit say that?
It's again, Elders Quorum President supports the bishop in focusing on the youth.
Yeah, that is just as clear as day.
Yeah.
That makes those 2 affidavits like
Lying.
deceitful,
Yep.
doesn't it?
In my view.
Yeah, mine do.
Like
too.
Kurt McConkie knows these rules, right?
I'm sure they do.
So that's like that's, the RFM, the liar, liar, pants on fire, Bill Reel kind of.
Yes, I had nothing to do with that podcast.
This is liar, liar, pants on fire territory, right?
There is no lie in these declarations. It's because there's no assertion of fact in the declarations.
Okay.
They are remarkable for saying nothing.
But it seems very deceitful.
It's certainly not the whole truth.
Yeah.
The next one, this one is an amendment to the 2010 Handbook of Instruction, which was the one that was being used at the current time the abuses happened. And it just talks about priests and teachers, which are youth, right? Continue to serve as ministering companions of Melchizedek priesthood holders. And then it says at the end, Elder Holland explained that ministering brothers and sisters will no longer report monthly visits, but will instead counsel with leaders in a quarterly, absolutely critical ministering interview about the needs and strengths of those that they are assigned. So basically, it just shows how the youth has interactions with the Melchizedek priesthood, and the one that probably is in charge of the Melchizedek priesthood in the ward is the Elders Quorum President.
Yeah, the Elders Quorum President would be the one tracking ministering progress, right? In the ward?
Yeah. From youth, right?
So they could be interviewing youth there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next one. And the title of that is Involve Youth. That's the title of that part. And that's not my title. That's part of the anyway. The next one says
so this 2010 handbook.
So I made a comparison because he was a bit different from 2010 and then he changed into the 2020. So on this one it says on the 2010, which was the one again that was being used at the time the abuse happened, it says Elders Quorum Presidency as assigned by the bishop. They work with parents and Aaronic priesthood quorum advisors to help 17 and 18-year-old young men prepare to receive the Melchizedek priesthood and progress from the priest quorum to the elders quorum. And then it looks like in 2020 it changed. So now Elders Quorum President, what they're going to be in charge of is only the 19-year-olds. It says a prospective elder is a male church member who has not received the Melchizedek priesthood and is either 19 or older or is younger than 19 and married.
Why is that interesting?
So kind of interesting that the rule changed, right? It went from being prospective elders from being 17 and 18 to being all 19.
Okay.
And then this last one, this is again from the 2010. The screenshot was taken in 2020, but this is from the 2010 amendment to the amendment to the 2010 Handbook of Instructions.
But it's not a legalistic religion.
Right. It's under direction of the bishop. The Elders Quorum President may be assigned to oversee member missionary work and temple and family history work in the ward. Which, temple work involves youth, with I think ended up coming up in the case.
Yeah, it did.
In the hearing, that Michael Davis, the abuser, would be in charge of temple trips, kind of stuff.
Yeah. It came out in the victim's testimony that Michael Davis would go with them and on temple trips, and that the victim would go over to Michael Davis's house after the temple trips and spend a lot of time there and spend overnights at Mr. Davis's house. And then when I testified, so I also testified in the trial for the prosecution. He had me testify to the just basic organization of the church, the hierarchy, the structure, what an Elders Quorum President is responsible for, what an Elders Quorum President might do in a branch, what some of his responsibilities might be. And I also mentioned, not having heard the victim's testimony, but I also mentioned this point that you just brought up, Gerardo, that Elders Quorum Presidents are responsible for, family history, temple work, organizing temple trips, going on temple trips with youth. And so I think the fact that those two, my testimony and the victim testimony kind of aligned was very supportive of the fact that he was in a position of authority.
Yeah, there's no question.
And lastly, this is just a picture of this little Book of Mormon reading challenge that Michael Davis allegedly created for the young men. And
did you get this from Michael? Michael, do you have anything to say about this?
Yeah, this is one of the pieces of evidence that came up in court as, again, evidence for the prosecution that he was interacting with youth, that he had some sort of mentorship role over youth because he created this Book of Mormon reading challenge and followed up with the youth and their parents about it.
Yeah. Okay.
And this one is a screenshot a screenshot of the defendant's witness list. And we highlighted the branch president. He's number 5, President Larson.
I mean, that's just so disgusting.
Yeah.
Why aren't they testifying on behalf of the plaintiff that the abuse was horrible and terrible and this guy should be locked away?
Why didn't the branch president testify at all?
Yeah, I don't know. He ended up not testifying. I have no idea why.
Because his
Maybe,
testimony would not have been helpful to the defense.
Maybe because he would either have to tell the truth and say that he was over the youth, or he would have to lie under oath. So maybe he grew a conscience. I don't know.
Or his testimony would have contradicted his affidavit, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
What I was also thinking is, there's some, because the fact that the bishop, the branch president told the parents and the victim about the inappropriate relationship that he was seeing, that came out in the court in the trial, right?
Yeah.
So my guess is that the bishop would have been asked about that.
Right.
And how does that fit with your affidavit that says that he was not over or in charge or in any kind of position over youth? Anyway, so
Michael, my understanding is that the defendant did not testify at trial. Did the defense put on any witnesses at all?
They only put on one witness. It was a social worker who took like an original abuse report. It was a very short testimony, and it really didn't add anything to the case. I think
I expect it was to show that not as much was reported initially as ended up being testified to by the victim as far as sexual abuse incidents.
Yeah, and I think he was also trying to point out some discrepancies between the original report and later reports. Yeah.
And I think that's that those are all the slides that we have for today.
So, do you want to tell us how this ended, Michael, and where things are now?
Yeah. So he was found guilty on Friday the 13th, last Friday. Apparently the jury only deliberated about 4 hours. My understanding is they, during their deliberation, wanted to watch the interview that was recorded. So here we do what's called a corner house interview, I think in Utah, when I used to work there as a child protection investigator, they take kids to the children's justice centers and do a interview so that the kids don't have to, testify in court. So the jury wanted to play that corner house interview, and then in 4 hours they found him guilty on all charges.
Are you saying a corner house?
Yep, corner house. It's just the name of the forensic interview that they use here in Minnesota.
So the confrontation clause of the U.S. Constitution does not apply in Minnesota then?
I don't know.
Apparently not. This sounds remarkable to me.
Yeah.
But other than that, I won't say anything more.
Yeah. So 4 hours. And how many counts? Guilty on how many counts? 4 counts.
4 counts.
Yeah.
5. And the 4 felonies, and then, right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if I'm like trying to check the boxes, we established the pattern beforehand, right? It's like, was this a repeat offender? Yes. Did the church not have systems in place to weed out repeat offenders from offending again? The church did not prevent the repeat offender from offending again. When the abuse happens, did the church protect the victim, or did the church protect the perpetrator? The church sided literally, legally. We've got legal documents proving that the church chose the side of the perpetrator over the victim, right? And punished any whistleblower that dared speak up or try and educate the membership, and then tried to silence it and tried to keep all the members from knowing about it. Like, I didn't stack the deck. I didn't intentionally stack the deck when I laid out the church's history in these regards. That is literally what I would have said a week ago before I'd never heard of this case. And this case literally is it missing anything, Jen, that you could think of from the pattern? Like, what are we missing?
I don't think anything.
I mean,
Unfortunately, that's the pattern. That's a very sad pattern.
I mean, the victim literally won in spite of the church's best efforts. The victim received justice in spite of the church's best efforts, and at the expense of Michael's reputation and status in the church.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Michael Benjamin.
Yes.
RFM, what do you think about this?
I think that the church's interests are probably never going to align with the victim's interests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to mention that there was a case this case reminded me to a case that happened recently, a few months ago in Argentina, Cordoba. And I think the reason why we haven't heard about it in the US is because everything is in Spanish. But I think, John, you had mentioned me about it, and RFM actually called me one time to ask me if I knew anything about it. I think we talked about it, but I think what was striking on that case was that basically it was a young man's president who abused of young women, and the church was able to get church lawyers involved really quickly and go to the mother of the victim and offer her around $43,000 in order for her to sign paperwork. And on the paperwork, in the translation for the name of that paperwork, it's called a reparation agreement in civil matter. And again, it was 4.7 million pesos, Argentinian pesos. That's around $42,000. And the agreement had a series of clauses that, according to the prosecutor, were the state prosecutor, were deplorable and sinister. And so among the clauses, he stressed that one stands out that prohibits the victim and her family from making any kind of demonstration about the fact or about any other person in the church, who could be involved. So basically, they can't mention about anyone else being involved in the case. Even though the bishop was really involved in this one, because the bishop was made aware of the abuse before the mother even know about it. And another provision was that the family agrees not to take any action against any other member of the church that may be involved. Basically trying to protect, the church leadership and the church. And this was huge in Chile. It happens that in other countries, I think, you can't not get away. Religions can't get away as easy as here in the U.S. with like some of this stuff. So it seems like they're looking to the prosecutor attorney is they are trying to hold the church accountable for because they say that this paperwork that they made the mom sign was illegal and shouldn't have been allowed. Anyway, so kind of interesting, how the church operates the same in other countries as well, trying to protect the church and the leadership and its authority over victims.
Yeah. And if anyone wants to think that this is just some isolated case of abuse and that this is actually rare in the Mormon church and that abuse almost never happens, all we have to do is, mention the case from last year, from September 15th. Here's a news article, September 15th, 2021. Boy Scouts Mormon Church reach $1 billion settlement with sex abuse victims, where an insurance company agrees to pay $787 million, and the Mormon Church agrees to pay $250 million towards the settlement. RFM, what can we safely conclude from the knowledge that the Mormon Church willingly offered to pay $250 million in a child sex abuse settlement? What can we conclude from that?
I think what we can conclude from that is they did a cost-benefit analysis and thought that it was better for them to pay, did you say
250 million.
250 million than to go to court and risk being assessed more.
But is the underlying that the idea that there are so many cases where the church is likely culpable that they needed to pay a lot of money to cover their vulnerabilities, as to the prevalence of child sexual abuse within the church that the church feels liable for? Is that, I know I'm making mincemeat of that, but
I'm not sure how many potential claimants there were against the LDS church. Certainly more than one, but I don't know how many. But I expect what happens is there's sort of a class action lawsuit that gets filed against the Boy Scouts of America. And then there's negotiations that go on between the defendant parties and Church of Jesus Christ being one, Catholic Church being another. And they talk with the attorneys and they say, can we come up with a number that'll resolve this with everybody in the class? And okay, well, this much money and who's going to pay how much? And then everybody has to come to an agreement, and then it's signed and it's done and the judge approves. And then the newspaper article gets written. So all I can say from that is that the church felt that it was smarter for them to pay $250 million than to not resolve the case.
But yeah, there's probably more than just a couple cases, right? Like
probably, yeah. Maybe 250. I have no idea. I'm not sure as to how many claimants there were against the LDS church in that.
Well, Michael, you've been super courageous and generous with your time in both doggedly pursuing this case, but also in being willing to talk to us about it. What are any final thoughts that you want to share with us as we're kind of wrapping up today?
I just hope, and I started with this, that my main purpose in speaking out isn't to necessarily speak out about the church or, against the church or against leaders. It's really to try to advocate for a safe place for children within the church and to have changes for, of policies and procedures within the church. I mean, that's my real goal. I'm a social worker at heart, and so my heart is always with children and protecting children and wanting them to be safe. And so that's my main purpose in speaking out, and has been from the beginning. I hope that from this case, there can be some changes within the church, that we can, start mandating background checks, even if the states don't require them, that the church within itself will do background checks, that we will follow the mandated reporter laws within the church. Instead of using the church abuse hotline, that leaders will have to, no matter what, call law enforcement or child protection to report abuse, and that the church will stop doing the one-on-one worthiness interviews, because I feel that's just, a way of grooming children and desensitizing children to feel comfortable, talking about sexually explicit things with older men. And so
In authority.
Exactly. Yeah.
Touche.
So those are some of my final thoughts. I just hope that, this case can be an impetus for some change.
And how are you feeling now that a guilty verdict has been reached? And, how are you feeling? Do you feel vindicated? How do you feel?
Yeah, I feel super relieved, validated, and also not only for myself, but for the victims, right? Not only the victim here in Minnesota, but the previous victims in Utah. They never got that guilty verdict, because he always took pleas. And so, I think it's vindication for them as well, that he finally is going to get jail time for his crimes.
Yeah. And is this had a personal toll on you, Michael? Just personally?
It has. Yeah. I mean, speaking out is hard. You feel alone a lot of the time. There's been people here and there who have been supportive, but it definitely feels lonely at times and has been stressful. And, there's nights that I would stay up, researching things and looking into things. But yeah, so it's taken a toll. I wouldn't say a huge one, but it's definitely been stressful over the last few years and kind of lonely.
Yeah. Yeah. It's someone, I think all of us know a little bit about how you feel speaking out in your community that doesn't like it when people speak out.
Yeah.
All of us have felt the impact of losing friends, losing family members, feeling marginalized or estranged, or just afraid, knowing you're surrounded by people that don't like what you're saying or doing.
Right.
Can I underscore something that Michael said, which is this strange situation we have where the church that proclaims itself as having the gold standard in protecting its children only does background checks on members who have a supervisory role over children when it's required by state law.
Exactly.
Which boggles my mind, because, any other nonprofit organization, any other, school worker, bus driver, daycare worker, all these other organizations, they're required to do background checks. But church leaders who work with, children and youth don't have to do a background check. It just boggles my mind.
Any other closing thoughts, RFM, that you want to share?
No, that's it. Michael Benjamin, I think you contacted me back in January or so to talk about this case. I think it's great that it's finally reached a resolution, and I'm looking forward to the appeal. What can I say? It's a spectator sport.
And I've appreciated your legal expertise during this conversation, RFM. It's been great.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me, Gerardo, at 9:00 p.m. yesterday.
Thank
I'm
you.
glad to be
Thank
here.
you for making time. Yeah.
RFM, thanks for coming. Really quickly, before we end, there's a comment from Camille Jones. We did an episode with Camille on Mormon Stories. She was the executive secretary to several LDS general authorities. She makes the point that many called to the Quorum of the 70 are lawyers or attorneys, or are high-level businessmen. And I think we we know at least a few of the reasons why. Not only is the church literally a $500 billion multinational corporation, but the church is always having to clean up messes, legal messes like this. And it's so helpful to have your top church leaders be attorneys like Dallin H. Oaks, right?
Yeah. Don't overlook the fact that lawyers are the most righteous among us.
Anyway, shout out to Camille. We love it that you're participating. Jen, any final thoughts you want to share? We're so glad you're here. Anything you want to share?
No, I pretty much said what I wanted to in the beginning, but yeah, I would say that whether you're, post-Mormon, active Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints member, that you just make it a priority. You use your voice. I know it's scary sometimes, and there's a fear in doing that, but use your voice in this space. At least start here. Everyone who works with children should have a background check. The ones that don't pass should not be involved with youth at all in any capacity within the church. And those on the sex offender list should be listed, and you should know about that within your wards. And this should be a priority. It should be a priority of the church. I'm just thinking, what if they, did a 180 and everyone, what if they, I guess their focus was the victim? What kind of church would that be? What kind of example would that be? What kind of affidavit would that be? What kind of change would that be? And I think that that's where the focus should be. It should be children. It should be telling the truth. And it should be doing everything that's in their power. And they have a lot of power. And they have a lot of money. And they have enough resources to make it safe. So them not doing that, it says a lot to me.
Yeah, both Maven and Camille basically highlighted, RFM, your comment that the church's interests will probably never align with the victim's interests. And I would also add the children's interests as maybe the quote of the evening. So thanks, shout out to Maven for joining us tonight. Also, Maven's two-part story is going to be released on Mormon Stories tomorrow and the next day, right?
Yeah, tomorrow and the next day.
Love you, Maven, and tune in tomorrow for Maven's awesome Mormon story. Gerardo, we want to give you a chance to give any closing thoughts or feelings you have since you brought this to us.
Yeah, well, I'm glad we covered it. Thank you, Michael, for all your work on this. Thanks, RFM, for taking that last-minute invitation and for all the reading you did for this. Yeah, we hope the church changes its policies, and it's sad that the church has included on as one of the definitions of apostasy that you cannot be against church policies. That used to not be part of the definition of apostasy, but so it's hard how can members really instigate for change if they can't oppose any kind of policy of the church? It's hard. It requires like brave people like Michael who are willing to take a risk and be called apostates and be labeled with that brand for this stuff to come to light. And yeah, so well, thanks everyone for watching.
And we'll share the comment from Kolby Reddish, who will be sharing his story, him and his wife's story, in the show notes. Kolby, we really should end with this. Kolby says local courage can be contagious, and members have the power if they wake up. And I think that's right. That's whether that's you Michael or Kolby and his dear wife, or any of you out there listening, if members speak up, if members ask for background checks, if members call leaders out when they're misbehaving, if members write their bishops and stake presidents and area authorities and say, make bishops mandatory reporters, have background checks for all leaders, stop protecting the abusers, start protecting the victims, stop silencing whistleblowers, stop paying off and settling with hush money, improve your computer systems to track these predators, excommunicate them and mark them for life so that they can't repeat offend. If members were to wake up and agitate for change and speak out and be vocal instead of going silent, and most importantly, speaking out against this egregious idea that the atonement somehow fixes a sexual predator, and should compel a victim to forgive immediately and stay quiet. We got to fix this toxic atonement doctrine that really is at the core, along with the idea that priesthood authority should reign supreme, that it should never be questioned, and that it must be protected at all costs, along with the church's wealth and its reputation. The Mormon Church needs to just back off its outrageous claims to priesthood authority and its prioritization of the church's reputation and of its bank accounts and assets over victims. So anyway, that's my rant. Thank you, Michael Benjamin.
Thank you for having me and for bringing attention to this case.
Thank you, Radio Free Mormon. Please check out Radio Free Mormon at radiofreemormon.com. If you love Radio Free Mormon like we do, donate money to him and his cause, and also follow Mormonism Live, which is every Wednesday night at 6:20 on YouTube, and donate to Mormonism Live, support Bill Reel and that amazing programming. Radio Free Mormon, we love you.
I love you too, John.
And Gerardo, it's great to have you on board. Thank you so much, Gerardo, for all you do for us.
Thank you.
And Jen, it's great to have you on board.
Thank you.
Yeah, it would not be an A+ programming without you. It'd be like a B at best. You take this sausage fest from a B to an A+.
Oh,
Easily,
thanks.
easily.
You're nice.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. All right, and listeners and viewers, thanks for joining us today on Mormon Stories. We appreciate all the support. We couldn't do this without your support. So if you value this type of programming, please become a monthly donor at mormonstories.org. And thanks to everyone who supports us. You can also support us by writing a positive review on the Apple Podcast app or on Spotify, by following us on all the social media platforms, and by sharing this content wherever you can with whoever you think. Share this interview, this panel discussion with your bishop or with your stake president if you're in a position to do so, or with your area authority or general authority. Like, maybe that will help. We also just really appreciate your feedback. So email us at mormonstories@gmail.com, or comment here on YouTube or on Facebook or on the blog. We love your feedback. And if you've got great stories that you think need to be told on Mormon Stories, we always are excited to hear from you. So thanks, everyone. Take care. And we'll see you all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. Stay tuned tomorrow for Maven Part 1, and then the next day for Maven Part 2. Take care, everybody.